is it like to study classics at the University of Oxford? I sat down with Sabrina, a first year classicist, to find out. What is classics?
What is classics? The age-old question. Classics is a subject which contains many subjects within it, so it's quite an interdisciplinary subject. Languages, philosophy, ancient history, art, literature. So we're just good all-rounders, to be honest. We have like a really big emphasis on learning the languages. You learn the languages very intensely, and then you use your knowledge of the languages to go into the other disciplines more. I don't think people really realize. They just think it's us just studying some dead old people, but actually in actual fact we look at art, we look at literature, we look at old buildings, architecture. We do like the stereotypical things that people think of when they think of classics, but like there's so much more to it than that.
I'm grateful you got the time with all of that going on to have an interview.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a thing to balance. So I am a course 1B person, which means that I took Latin at A level. I think what they're planning on making us do is that we're learning Greek intensively from the beginning of this year, and hopefully by the end of this year or like the beginning of next term, we should be up to like A level Greek standard, which is it's quite a big ask, especially because it presents different challenges. Greek is different because it has obviously a different alphabet to us. So with Latin, I found it a lot easier because it's just like learning a modern language, but trying to like learn to read in a different alphabet, and yeah, it's just quite a lot.
I guess you might say it's all Greek to me. It's incredibly intense, as you say, to pick up a new language, to be proficient at A level standard within a term. But is it doable?
It is doable, and the nice thing I guess about starting a language from scratch at Oxford is that when you're doing your language classes, you have an atmosphere of camaraderie because everyone's just in it together, and you all, there's no like preconceptions about what you're doing or like how good you'll be. You all just help each other, and that's quite nice. And with Latin, because you've done at A level, they sort of expect you to do more self-study, so we only have 1 hour a week of that from the faculty anyway. And then but within your college you might also be offered to do more classes, so you might be offered to so your tutors at your college might be like, oh, we're doing an extra Latin class here and we're going to be reading this text together, and you can also go to them for help if you're struggling, which is really good because it means that you're not sort of just shoved in the corner and told to get on with it. Like, you can go and get help if you need to go and get it.
How do you feel about the college system in Oxford?
I would probably say it's like we have the university that's, you know, all over the city, that's like university wide, and then the colleges are just kind of like mini universities in a way. So they are where you mainly spend your time working, socializing, eating. That's like your main hub, and obviously you can go out and go to different colleges. Like normal times you would be able to go into any college if you wanted to and look around, and obviously you can make friends at different colleges and go and visit them and talk to them and everything. But your college is your main, it's like your main place where you just live and like you do things. I don't really know how to describe it. With a college, it's very much like a small community. Like the atmosphere at your college is pretty important in terms of what your experience will be, because obviously if you go to like a very big bougie college, then you're gonna have like more traditional vibes. Like you might have a certain percentage more of students from a certain background at different colleges, depending on like their history and their vibe basically. So I chose my college because it's has accommodation guaranteed for as many years as I'm here, so 4 years, and it also has, like, I think I looked at the breakdown, it's quite a state schooly college, different vibes to like the proper sort of Harry Potter traditional ones as well. So yeah, it's like different flavors of Oxford basically. And each college has like their own sort of reputation and vibes and appearance and whatnot. An important thing to think about is, what do you want out of a college? Like, what do you want it to be like? Do you want it to be more like people like you? So specifically, if you're from a state school, would you want to be around more state schoolers if it's known for that? Do you want to be in a Hogwarts building, or do you want to be in like a more modern building? Do you want accommodation guaranteed for all your years of your study, or are you okay with living out? Because is your college rich? If it's rich, it might have more bursaries. I think the alternative prospectus for Oxford has a college picker, so it literally just it gives you like these sort of little options of like, what do you want out of college? Do you want a 24-hour library? Not that we've been having much of those recently, but you know, that's a different issue. Do you want a gym? If you feel like you don't necessarily really click with the people at your college, you usually will have options to socialize outside of your college anyway.
Quite a crude question, but you talked about people who don't go to state schools, as in people who go to private schools. And you might lump into that people who seem posh and people who are rich. Should that put people off? Like, what genuinely, what's your experience? Do they live up to the Oxford stereotype of the Bullingdon Club, or are they just actually quite normal and nice, or somewhere in between?
I think, okay, so first things first, it's a very southern university, so I think that should just be like heads up to people from the north. Like, you will come here and you will just think, oh my god, everyone is just southern and from London. Because there's a lot of people from London, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't apply, because how else are we going to, you know, change the dynamic if nobody applies? You will always have, at whatever university you go to, you will always have arrogant, you know, arrogant prigs. They will be wherever you are. It's just a matter of, do you want to socialize with them or not? Of course there are more, there's a higher percentage of private schoolers at Oxford, but with that I would say, so take me for example. I sound quite posh, but I've been to a state school all of my life. I from a relatively normal background, but the way I sound doesn't necessarily, like, I don't know, where I live, people just talk like this more, so then people have like formed preconceptions of what you are like, and they'll think that everyone who speaks like this is automatically posh or not, when it's just not the case. And I think it's also a good thing to remember about private schoolers is that a lot of people who go to private school are there because their parents have sent them there and have sacrificed a lot to send them there, especially like in if you're living in the north and there's like not necessarily as many, you know, good grammar schools or, I don't know, selective schools or whatever. A lot of parents have sacrificed a lot to get their kids into these private schools that are you know, like, that are better, whatever that means, and they'll just be as normal. They've been on bursary, they haven't, you know, like, they haven't been like, I don't know, they're not the sort of stereotype that you always think of. Of course there are people that are the stereotype, but to be honest with you, like, they're nice enough, and you can find people that are horrible that are from like a poorer background as well. You know, it doesn't necessarily weigh itself up. Like, in general, people are really nice. I made it sound really scary, but like, in general, people are really nice.
Talking about interviews and admissions tests, then, tell me about how you found your interviews.
I personally had a really, really good interview experience. I ended up staying there between Tuesday and Friday. It's what it ended up being, in December, and it was quite nice because it was a sort of break from school, and it was like a little trip away. You could just go and stay in one of these cool old buildings and get free food and free, like, you don't have to pay for anything. You could everyone was really friendly, and we all just were kind of in awe of what was going on, and we all just wanted to make friends and just you know, take our minds off the situation. So they had things going on in the JCR every evening, and like they had activities, and you would just go around and meet new people. But in terms of my actual interviews, I had 2 at my original college. One was for philosophy and language. I didn't do philosophy before I went to interview, so it, like, they say philosophy and language, but it was just kind of weird and wacky interviews, whatever they tell you. Like, we had things on the philosophy behind metaphors, and like what metaphors are and why we use them, and is something more of a metaphor than something else. That was that one. And then we had a ancient literature and history one at, yeah, it was the other interview, which was more of like, you get set 20 minutes of, for each of the interviews you get 20 minutes of like pre-reading, and we got given a poem to sort of annotate and then talk about in the interview, and then they would just ask you other questions about your personal statement. One of them was like a pure Latin grammar interview where it was just translation and grammar. They give you like a poem and you had to just talk, he'd ask you grammar questions, and that interview was different because you could tell how you were doing. With the other 2 you don't know, but with this one it was like yes or no, you're wrong. It was more of that situation. And then after that I had another philosophy interview, which was awful. I'm not, it was so bad. If I'm like, just goes to show, if you have one bad interview, it doesn't necessarily mean your chances are over, because that one was terrible. And I know it was terrible as well because the woman asked me if she needed to open the window because I either looked too pale or too red. I don't know what it was, but and then being asked the sort of more personal questions of, what are you like as a student? How will you thrive? How do you manage stress? And I think everyone who answers those questions is slightly lying through their teeth, because we all haven't quite figured it out yet either. I did enjoy them, but they were also kind of stressful because, especially the philosophy ones, I hadn't done philosophy before and I felt so stupid. Some of them I thought I did okay in, and they felt like good conversations. They're like asking you questions back. It's like a back and forth thing. And then some of them, they're just sitting there staring at you, waiting for you to answer, and you just have no answers to give. And you're just like, I just don't know.
What were the interviewers like then? Were they, obviously an interview is intimidating, right? Because you want to do well, it feels really important. But did you get the sense that the interviewers were on your side or not? Did they give much away? Did they fit into the stereotype, kind of a bit slightly aloof?
It was a bit of a variety, because I did have one interview where there was like a very sort of stereotypical professor kind of guy, and he was really nice, but he was very much a sort of, you just felt like more intimidated by him just because he just was so, the stereotype, I guess, of like the old professor sitting in his chair asking you questions. I think the biggest thing for all of them is that you can't read them. You could be having a bad interview and they'll still be friendly, or you could be having a good interview and they'll be friendly. They are really nice people to just like chat to in the interview. They would like, I mean, the ones that I had anyway, they did try and go out of their way to make you feel comfortable. You know, they asked you, oh, do you want some water? Do you like do you want to sit here, or and I had quite a few younger PhD students in the interviews who were usually taking notes for the older like tutors or lecturers, I guess. And they especially were really nice and friendly. They will help you after a while if you really don't know what you're doing. They will help you, they will give you hints, and then they will try and steer you in the right direction. Like, they do want to help you, but they were also testing to see how you act in like situations where you don't feel like, you feel really insecure and you don't know what you're doing.
How did you prepare?
I think the main thing for the practice interviews is to be given unseen material and then asked to just you know, give a certain time to just jot down your thoughts and everything, then go into interview and start talking about it. I also try to go through everything I put on my personal statement, like, not even if not reread, try and pick out the key bits that I'd written about and just reread those bits, and then try and think of some extra things to say about them in case I was asked about listened to podcasts a lot when I was on my way to school, or if I was walking the dog. Specifically for classics, there's like a lot of mythology ones that like Mythunderstood if you're into mythology, but also ancient Greece Declassified is another one. Keeping Up with the Classics. It's like all these sort of extra little topics, like they'll just talk about random topics, and then you might be asked about that in an interview. Like I was listening to one on In Our Time, and then one of the poems that which was about Sappho, and one of the poems that we got given for interview was a Sappho poem. So it was kind of helpful to just get that little broad range of knowledge. Professor Edith Hall, she's just made she's launching like her YouTube channel. She is like a really big classics professor at King's College London. She's made a YouTube channel where she's going to upload all of her lectures for free, everything, you know, all of her content that she makes, she's just going to put it up on the internet so that anyone can access it.
What is the classics test?
The Latin Cat and the translations, they are difficult. They're like 2 A-level texts, but in half the amount of time. So it's okay not to finish them. It's okay to feel like you did not know what was going on, as long as you try and give it a proper go and you try and read it all the way through. And you can leave gaps. I left gaps, like it's okay. And also, like, I think the thing to remember is, as long as you are actually giving it a proper go, 94% of, I think, was it 94 or 96% of classics applicants get an interview anyway. So you can massively mess up the test, get an interview, and then the interview might save you. I don't know. But like, we have better odds of getting an interview than probably other subjects, because they're more interested in like you as an individual and your personal interests in things. So
A question that I've really been wanting to ask: how do you feel about walking in the footsteps of one Boris Johnson?
Right, why does everyone bring this up? You know, of all the famous, you know, people who've done classics, of all the great figures of history, and then everyone just brings up Boris Johnson.
Is Boris Johnson not a great figure of history?
I will say no more on the matter. No.
What would you say to someone watching this video, considering applying to classics or not considering applying to classics? Should they, shouldn't they?
I would say the only way you're never going to get in is if you don't apply. There is a place for everyone. So you just have to be brave enough to claim it and give it a shot. And particularly for classics, it's like, it's such a cool subject, and you shouldn't let the stereotypes just make you feel like you don't belong in that community, or you're not allowed to study it or give it a try, or that people will just look down on you because you haven't done any of the languages before, for example. I think that's a big worry for a lot of people who it's never been offered to them as a subject in their schools. They don't really know what it is. They don't really know how to get into it. It's okay if you liked Percy Jackson and then you just, you know, were like, I like English as well, let's just apply to the classics. Like, that's okay. And that doesn't mean that you're any less of a student than these people who've been doing Latin since they were 4.